On this edition of SciTech Now, find out what's inside all those blue solar panels you see generating electricity across central New York.
Of course, when we first got married, our electrical bill was about $12 a month, and now it's $175.
Then we learn about how one lab is helping veterans transition from the battlefield to the tech market.
And we already have that working mindset. It's something that we're used to doing. It's a different industry. It's a different goal that we're trying to achieve, but the skill set is there.
We study what role genetics play in autism.
Not all of your genes are inherited from your mother and your father, but there could actually be new genetic mutations that might arise in that child, and that might be the cause of autism.
And just how close are we to turning the movie Jurassic Park into reality? Coming up next on SciTech Now.
SciTech Now is made possible through the support of our members.
Mohawk Valley Community College. Your future starts here. Offering education and workforce development ranging from hands-on to high-tech, including nano, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and more. More information at mvcc.edu.
And by Giotto Enterprises, whose companies include Fiber Instrument Sales, The Light Connection, Molding Solutions, and Firmer Precision, providing solutions for fiber optic, telecom, molding, and CNC machining industries. More information at giottoenterprises.com.
Hello, I'm Simon Perez, and welcome to SciTech Now, our weekly program bringing you the latest breakthroughs in science, technology, and innovation here in central New York and across the country. And we start with a solar company in Canastota. Most of us know what solar panels look like, but how do they really work? We spoke with an energy expert who tells us what's happening on the inside.
What are these? Honeycrisp. That's the thaw fryer in it. Yeah, I was a dairy farmer for years. So I just kept in the farming. It's another type of farming. See all these stems that are turning orange? Them are the ones you're going to drop. I got an apple orchard and then 75 beehives. My wife bought me a book on bees, and I bought one hive and then went from there. We produce about 6,000 pounds a year. Now you have to go down to the main box.
Whenever that breaker comes in.
We have a walk-in cooler, and it's quite expensive to run it. I think once you're on the grid, you're used to it. And of course, when we first got married, our electrical bill was about $12 a month, and now it's $175. And so we decided to try to get solar panels, and so here we are. They're putting them in today.
Well, central New York, throughout the entire year, we have an average of 4.2 hours of sun a day, which is more than enough to make solar panels work here. What most people want to know is that panels just capture the sun, they create it to energy, and that pumps it back into the grid. The sun gives off photons. Photons come down and hit the panels. What is inside the panels, you have a glass on top with a thin adhesive clear layer, and then you're going to have an anti-reflective coating. And inside there is going to be silicone. And silicone in itself is a little too pure to create energy. So they take two different impurities and they dope down the silicone. After that, there's going to be what we would call a junction layer that gets created by taking the bottom layer, which they usually dope down the silicone with boron to make the P-type. So you have to create a current to get the energy going. So when the P-type and the N-type come together, they create the PN junction in the middle, and that the electrons try to fill the holes in the middle by coming down from the top that only allow the electrons to flow up. When the power hits the panel and they create a power, that's creating DC power, direct current power. So we have to use an inverter to convert that power from DC power to AC, because everything in your home runs on AC power. This is a solar edge inverter. Gets stood up straight, hung on the wall. This is what converts the DC power to AC power so that you can use the power that you're creating. Once the panels are up on the roof, they're all tied together. We can send down as many as 3 strings, 18 panels per string. The wires will get fed into the bottom here. Power comes up, gets converted from DC to AC, comes out the other side, and then the other side gets strung into your electric panel so that the power gets put back into your home. Hanging here on the bottom is a DC optimizer. Individualizes each panel and shoots the DC power down to the inverter. So the panels plug into this, and then that connects from one panel to the next. This is something you'll see in some jobs. When you have a bigger system, you'll have an AC disconnect. This takes the power coming out of the inverter and allows it to go into your electric panel or not. If you shut that off, then there's no AC power coming out. That will also shut down the inverter because it's not seeing the AC power from the other side. And then inside here, we can tie in with a breaker. If the system's small enough, we just plug the wires coming off our system into the breaker, and then that feeds into the board, which there would be a main disconnect on a typical house panel. And then that feeds into the meter, that spins backwards and gives you your credit.
It saves the resources. It saves the fuel oil, the propane gas, and sunshine is free. So the investment of having the solar panels put in, it's an investment, but I think it'll pay off in the long run.
And you're seeing more and more panels on roofs and that now. So people, I think, kind of trying to save energy by doing, why you get it from the sun, why use up our resources making power? So this helps.
In 2014, a solar energy industry group ranked New York 7th in the country for the amount of solar electricity capacity. There are more than 20 million veterans in the United States, and many of them don't know the skills they learned in the military can help them succeed as entrepreneurs. New business labs are helping to make that connection.
A nice little thing to have, but nobody really cared. But how important this was. The next chapter in the history of Wall Street is being written right now.
Most of what I do will be driven toward, again, just aiding other veterans. They're the people that I want to work for me. They're the people that I want to work for.
There are 21.8 million veterans in the United States, and it is estimated that by September 2015, close to 12 million veterans under the age of 65 will be looking for their next opportunity.
I was in the Coast Guard for 8 years, 10 months. I like to tell people 9 years. I loved the Coast Guard. It was definitely something I wish I would have continued to pursue. I got injured, so now I'm using the opportunity and everything that the Coast Guard has given me to be able to start my own small business.
The Entrepreneurship Veterans Bootcamp at Pace University in New York is an example of how numerous organizations across the country are answering the Joining Forces call.
So you just drag it and or import it and just place it over the surface.
Programs like these, especially boot camps, which focus on understanding very basics of technology or entrepreneurship or any other skill, are important for any veteran because they are trying to transfer their skills like dedication, time management. They learn all these skills in the military, but if they want to transfer these to the corporate environment, they need to get a little bit of understanding of how things work out here. If they know how to do basics of HTML or JavaScript or some programming language, then they can go ahead and build a business out of it.
The Veterans Entrepreneurship Bootcamp is designed around two central ideas: a hands-on focus on practical training in venture creation and growth, and the application of technologies from website building to 3D printing.
As a veteran entrepreneur, if you're interested in starting a new business, knowledge of technology tools, even the basic knowledge of how to create a website and how to 3D print simple products can help you in the future capture opportunities which might come your way.
Everything I have learned, I am applying it. Like the importance of the website, I don't even know how to use the techniques that I get here, so I'm working on that.
And I thought it would be good to get a feeling for what is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I'm interested in all things entrepreneurship. And I didn't serve in the military, and I thought this could be a great way for me to do something for those that did serve. Like, do you need a partner who's like really good at market research, or do you need a partner who's really good at technology? I thought combining, our strengths in entrepreneurship, being a military-friendly school, this would be something that would make sense, and it gave me a lot of personal satisfaction to be able to help those that served.
I was a U.S. Navy corpsman.
So I was a combat medic with the Marine Corps. Any Marine Corps unit that go on deployment, we would go out with them. We were the first responders. If they got shot, we were there to patch them up.
For many veterans, this is a chance to start over and apply skills learned in the military to civilian life.
You do learn in the military that there's a level of tolerance and a level of, I guess, arrogance. So what you have to be able to do is mitigate that risk, but still be accepting of it. Being able to do that in a high intensity situation, such as, a startup business where you're already working 16 hours a day or something like that, the veterans come out and we already have that working mindset. It's something that we're used to doing. It's a different industry. It's a different goal that we're trying to achieve, but the skill set is there.
A lot of people would think they're diametrically opposed. Military, take orders, just do what, you're told, where entrepreneurial is much more creative thinking. But I think there is a lot of overlap.
In the United States, 9% of businesses are owned by veterans, and 5.8 million people are employed by veteran-owned businesses.
I have a construction business. G&J Leading Construction Inc. is my company. And I was searching about the opportunities that the construction field has. So I thought it was a lot of opportunities, especially for women owning a small business, disabled veteran, minority. The benefits that this workshop offers is great. Everything that entrepreneur needs to know basically to start a business is very important.
Through the program, veterans also create a community and learn from one another not only about how to be entrepreneurial, but also about how to move on.
And they would melt it down and make the new.
Being that the program is only open to veterans, it would be difficult for someone who hadn't had that kind of experience to communicate with them. So when I go out and I talk to people, it's the first thing that I say because it builds a rapport. And I know that they know that I have the same set of skills and the same level of drive that they do. And they know that I'm going to help them accomplish the goals that they want to get done.
Avid video gamer, love it passionately. When you're playing a game, you could stream it so other people could watch it. My thought was, why not bring it to the couches of people and have a whole network for it? That's the idea I came in here with.
I would like that, this type of workshop be a little bit more publicized, because I know that if a lot of veterans come here and take this, the beneficial is going to be great.
The Veterans Boot Camp is awesome. Yeah.
New York has the 4th highest number of businesses run by veterans in the United States. From 2000 to 2010, the number of children diagnosed with autism in the United States more than doubled, making it the fastest growing developmental disability. But there's still a lot we don't know about the disorder. SciTech Now's Hari Srinivasan sat down with an autism expert who explains the role genetics plays in this illness.
What are the role of genetics? I mean, there's this question of nature versus nurture on how autism happens.
Sure. So, as you correctly pointed out, we don't know everything that causes autism. However, the place where we've made the greatest inroads to understanding this has been in the area of genetics. And that's largely because our tools have become much sharper, much more robust in terms of being able to determine this. Work that many individuals have done, a very large community of research scientists have looked in particular to see what the role of new genetic mistakes might be in autism. And this is kind of a novel concept. The idea that not all of your genes are inherited from your mother and your father, but there could actually be new genetic mutations that might arise in that child, and that might be the cause of autism. And in fact, when we start looking at that, all told, about 25% of individuals probably have their autism because of a genetic, new genetic mistake. And so it's sort of a new concept that's out there.
When you think about an absolutely new gene, that's like 1 in a billion, 1 in a, I don't know what the number is, chance, right?
So you would think, but actually now that we have the data, which we didn't have before, if I look at any child, any mother, father, and child combination, in fact, all of us have new genetic changes. This is not in and of itself all that novel. All of us have in our genetic information literally at least 100 places that are different from our moms or our dads. New places where there are essentially sort of proofreading mistakes that happened. The issue is that for most of us, we got off lucky, and so those new genetic changes didn't happen to fall within critical genes or critical parts of genes that have to do with the way the brain develops or the way the brain functions. However, for a small segment of kids, and obviously, as you correctly pointed out, it's small, but it's not too small, that actually lands just smack dab in a gene that happens to be really critical to the way the brain forms, it develops, and the way it functions. And in fact, that's what's leading to a lot of autism that we see today.
you know, that number has increased so dramatically, and I want to ask, why is that? Is that because we're now more aware of it?
Yeah.
We're having this conversation,
Right.
or that we're diagnosing more of it because we're more aware? I mean, it's sort of a chicken and egg here.
So in fact, it's a little bit of both, in the sense that, number one, in a very, very good way, all sorts of people are now more aware of this. Pediatricians, educators, therapists, and that, you know, they're aware of what the diagnosis is and they're making that diagnosis. In a good way, that means that kids are actually getting the treatment that they need. The other part of it, and I'm not being critical about this, but people also use the term somewhat loosely. And they're using it to try and communicate that the idea has a child has some sort of neurodevelopmental disability. But to be honest, it may not be exactly autism. It's clearly a child who has challenges, who may need special services, but people use the term rather loosely. And because, in a good way, that services oftentimes are tied to a diagnosis of autism, some people use it to their advantage. And so, you know, it's been, I think, increasing in prevalence in part due to that, but I don't think that's the whole reason. I do think there are issues that we have to think about in terms of what are the risk factors for autism, what really causes it in the first place, and there really truly may be an increase over time.
And that autism isn't one specific thing. There's a spectrum. Right?
Absolutely. So, you know, you can sort of, if you think back in terms of your own experience, that spectrum of autism is extremely large. So there's everything from kids who are nonverbal, who are severely impaired, who may even be having self-injurious behaviors, seizures, you know, other significant neurodevelopmental disorders. So there are some kids who, quite honestly, are just remarkably gifted in terms of their talents, but in terms of some of the rigidity that they have, some of the ability to interact with other folks, some of their need, you know, for being able to have things just so, you know, that's still the same diagnosis of autism, but at the completely other end of that spectrum. So really this umbrella term that we use for autism is probably more like hundreds of different disorders all jumbled together.
So what do you want to do with the project that you're working on? How do you kind of increase the data set and get more people and more genes that you can take a look at?
Right, so that's a great question, and that's really what we're all about. I think we increasingly realize that this isn't one disorder, and there's not going to be one treatment, one answer, one way of supporting these individuals. And so we're really going to need to be able to increase our numbers. Previous studies of autism have included things like hundreds, maybe even a few thousand individuals. We're getting pretty radical at the Simons Foundation, and we're thinking that we actually need big data sets to be able to solve what really are a myriad of different disorders. So we want to do this, but we want to do this very much in collaboration with the individuals who are actually affected with this, individuals with autism, their parents, their families. We realize we've got to come together as a community because those families, those individuals, they have enormous insight that I don't always have as just a researcher. So we're building these bridges, we're building these partnerships, and we're literally thinking about, for instance, needing 50,000 individuals, a large number to be able to put together, and being able to include within that studies of the genes to know which individuals have genetic answers, and many people won't, but which ones do, what are the genes that are involved in this, and then to start to understand for each different genetic flavor of this, what are the specific things that we can do, with the hope that there are going to be actually gene-specific treatments that we're going to be able to develop to help these folks. And
so that might mean pharmaceutical drugs designed for the gene or different types of gene therapies?
Absolutely. So I think we're keeping everything on the table. There's some, I know this is radical, but there's some where there's actually going to be a fix in terms of a dietary intervention, a very specific either vitamin cofactor that's deficient or a particular restriction we need to make in the diet. There are other individuals that, correctly, as you said, it may be a specific pharmaceutical agent that's going, or a drug or a pill that's going to be able to be most efficacious. And other individuals, we may need to think about much more sort of root cause in terms of gene therapy. With all of these, though, I bet you there are going to be other strategies we can use in terms of educational and behavioral strategies that'll probably serve a large portion of the community as well.
Dr. Wendy Chung, the principal investigator at the Simons Variation in Individuals Project. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. And if anyone wants to learn more about this, they can go to the Interactive Autism Network online and read more about this project.
Early signs your child may be at risk for autism include no big smiles by 6 months, no babbling by 12 months, or no words by 16 months. Some scientists say we're currently in the middle of the 6th mass extinction of species on the planet, meaning nearly half of all species could disappear in the next few decades. But what if we could bring species back from the dead? An expert at the American Museum of Natural History tells us whether what we saw in the movie Jurassic Park could actually happen.
The idea of de-extinction is that we can bring back species that are now completely gone. A major flashpoint of interest in what has now led to de-extinction technology happened about 10 years ago when Dolly the sheep was created. In many ways, Dolly was the harbinger of the kind of technology that will permit us to do even more sophisticated kinds of creation of species that used to exist, species that still exist, and perhaps even species that never existed. We can group relevant methods into three large categories. There's backbreeding, which humans have practiced literally for thousands and thousands of years. This is being done right now in Western Europe, trying to recreate what's known as the aurochs. The way cows look today is not the way the cattle family looked 10,000 years ago. So if your problem is to recreate one of those primitive cows, what do? Well, you reach back into the genetic code by selecting for animals that have slightly longer horns or a bigger bulk or the kind of hide coloration that you think is appropriate. It is a very viable and low-tech way of de-extinction. And the investigators trying to do this, backbreeding to aurochs, have had some success. The animals look quite a bit like old representations that go right back to cave paintings. But what is it really? What it is really is a constellation of traits that you selected for, and you know nothing really about how close it is physiologically to an aurochs because there's no way of examining a living aurochs at present. You also don't know about behavior. Behavior tends not to fossilize in any realistic manner, and the degree to which any modern cow resembles an aurochs in terms of behavior is a complete unknown. A second method for de-extinction that has improved greatly in the last 10 years is cloning, particularly the kind of cloning known as somatic cell nuclear transfer. You take the genetic material, the nucleus, of one cell, you put it into another, an egg, and that egg is then placed in an animal that will act as surrogate mother and produce an offspring. There's also been massive improvements in what we can call synthesis. Synthesis involves making up our own sequence, just like in a recipe. If you have two species, one extinct, one living, you can get the genetic material of the extinct one and compare that to the living one. Passenger pigeons died out finally almost exactly 100 years ago. Passenger pigeons have several very close relatives among pigeons, and one is the band-tailed pigeon, which is very close indeed. In recent years, scientists have been able to isolate the differences between the genomes of extinct passenger pigeons and living band-tailed pigeons. They have been able to inject these novel sequences into the germline of developing band-tailed pigeons, and using surrogates with the sex cells of passenger pigeons. If you crossbreed them one to another, you will, in the next generation, get something that should look exactly like a passenger pigeon. Now comes the basic question here, which is, what are you going to do with passenger pigeons, assuming that you go ahead and create a whole flock of them? It's been estimated that there were probably more passenger pigeons than any other kind of bird ever. I don't know what we would do with 1 billion passenger pigeons. We don't like pigeons to begin with in this place. A very important thing to consider about extinctions in general, in the course of life on the planet, is that the waters close very quickly when a species disappears. What tends to happen is that other species move in. This is how evolution, in fact, works. The mammoth behind me perfectly illustrates some of the issues that we're going to face with de-extinction. There is no place for several more very large herbivores in a place like the US, except under very controlled conditions. Who's going to take care of them? How are you going to provision them? Are we thinking that we're going to bring back the Pleistocene by virtue of having a few extinct species? What we're really talking about is undertaking a whole lot of unplanned experiments, the consequences of which are very hard to predict. We don't want a situation in which we drive out species that are perhaps already endangered thanks to us with something else that we drove to extinction thousands of years ago. De-extinction, to the degree it will take place, should be limited in its scope, limited in its ambition, limited in the kinds of species that we bring back. But if there was one animal I could vote for to bring back, it would be one of these giant ground sloths. If you want people to be interested not only in what the planet still has and how we might conserve it, but what the planet has recently lost, and perhaps most particularly what it's lost because of human activities, then to see these again, to see mammoths again in the flesh, would be an exciting prospect. it would raise rather than dampen interest in preserving what we have and what we used to have.
We may be closer than we think. A professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz has just published a book entitled How to Clone a Mammoth. That's it for this edition of SciTech Now. For more information on science, technology, and innovation, visit our website at wcny.org/SciTechNow and join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Next week on SciTech Now, find out how a Cornell team of scientists could help usher in ultra-thin electronics with a transistor just 3 atoms thick. Then we see how new technology could take the food you throw away and put it back on grocery store shelves. What's behind the planet's next mass extinction? And see what happens when regular folks grab a microphone and tell stories about science. I'm Simon Perez. We'll see you next week on SciTech Now.
SciTech Now is made possible through the support of our members.
Mohawk Valley Community College. Your future starts here. Offering education and workforce development ranging from hands-on to high-tech, including nano, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and more. More information at mvcc.edu.
And by Giotto Enterprises, whose companies include Fiber Instrument Sales, The Light Connection, Molding Solutions, and Firmer Precision, providing solutions for fiber optic, telecom, molding, and CNC machining industries. More information at giottoenterprises.com.